Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's professional development series, the presentation Business Analytics and Related Strategies. This session will be recorded and available to you on our chamber website in the event you needed to access the information again or share with your colleagues. So we are able to provide this offering free of charge to our chamber members, courtesy of the sponsor, our sponsor, the College of St. Scholastica, Stender School of Business and Technology. Speaking today on behalf of the College of St. Scholastica is Joe Jankar, the admissions counselor for Health Information and Informatics program. Joe, I appreciate you being here today.
Thanks, Chris, and I appreciate the time. I just want to take a minute to introduce some of the College of St. Scholastica's Stender School of Business and Technology degree programs, and this won't take long, then I'll turn it back to Chris so we can get on with the main part of our senior.
Hey.
Bachelor's degree program in health information management in the nation back in 1935. And then we offered the first bachelor's distance program in 1981, the first online master's degree in HIM, and the first master's program that was accredited by KHIM. We also offer a master's degree program in health informatics, as well as a certificate program in the same area. We also have the MBA in Leadership and Change, and that's a unique graduate program that prepares students to lead strategic change in their organizations, in their professions and communities. In this program, students are able to develop their critical thinking, cultural competency, and ethical decision-making abilities, all essential for leading and managing in a rapidly changing global environment. The online MBA in Rural Healthcare program that we offer is designed for healthcare professionals at all levels who serve rural communities and recognize the need to manage the emerging challenges and changes in the healthcare system. We also offer our master's degree in project management, and that offers a deeper, richer curriculum than other project management certificates that are available. And our program focuses on the knowledge and skills required to be an effective leader with an emphasis in leading global and distributed teams. Also, we'll be launching a master's degree in healthcare administration program, and that will start in the next academic year. Finally, we offer a master's degree in applied data analytics, and that provides an in-depth study in analytics with the added advantage of being able to apply the skills and knowledge to your field of interest. The master's curriculum covers a broad range of analytics topics, and with a focus on the ethical implementation of analytics in decision-making. And if anyone would like further information, please let me know, or Chris can provide my contact information. And that's it. So back to Chris now. Thank you for the time.
Yeah, hey Joe, thank you so much. We really appreciate the information. And as always, thank you again for the sponsorship. We're really pleased to have you represented and to be able to bring this to our chamber members. So at this point, I will turn it over to David. I am excited to introduce him today. It's David Marc, PhD, CHDA, who is an associate professor, the Health Informatics and Information Management Department Chair, and the Health Informatics Graduate Program Director at the College of St. Scholastica. He's also an accomplished researcher, author, and a national speaker. So thank you so much for presenting to us today, David, and I will turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you all for being here today. I see some familiar names on the screen, so I'm happy to have you join today. So today I'm going to talk a bit about something near and dear to my heart, business analytics and data analytics more generally. And we're going to cover some information. If you read through the overview of what the session has to offer, I highlighted kind of the main themes you're going to see emerge over the course of this presentation. Another thing too is be ready. I'm going to ask you to participate in different ways too. So be ready. When we get to that point, I'll give you a little more information on what to expect. But overall today, I'm going to cover some just basic definitions to start off with. Then I'm going to cover a process to explore to implement data analytics in a business setting. And then I'm going to share some information about how to become more data savvy, and then framing your mindset around solving problems using data. And then we'll end with some Q&As. And then I was on Instagram strolling one day, scrolling through, you know how we do that, right? And I saw this show up on Instagram, and it like, is it pronounced data or data? And I think that's a good way to just start this off, is if you pronounce it data or data. Now I say data, you may say data. There's no right or wrong, but I'm the one that, you know, puts the grades on people's papers. So it's data. Let's just be done with it. All right. So we're going to start this off with user interaction, participant interaction. And so what I'd like you all to do is go to this website. And the way you could do this is if you got a computer, you can open up a tab on your computer, on your browser, go to pollev.com/CSSHIIM, or you can bring up your phone and go on to your browser on your phone and go to this website. And the first question I'm going to share with you. Hang on just a second here. All right, so here's the first thing I'm going to ask you. When you hear the word data, how does it make you feel? Not data, it's data, but how does it make you feel? All right, and as you're responding, you're going to see these little pins begin to show up on the screen. It's based off of where you click. So it appears so far I'm talking to the right audience. Many of you like to hear the word data. You might not live for data, but you like to hear that word. We have one person neutral. Maybe we'll convince you by the end of this that you should be a little more excited about data. We'll see. All right, cool. So I'm talking to like-minded people. We enjoy data. I think that's great. I love to see my fellow data nerds. You know, we can have good conversation. And if you leave that little poll, that little page open on your web browser, I'm going to ask you one more question here. So it's in one word. I just got to make sure I'm doing the right one. All right. So I have another poll to ask you. And the poll is going to ask you, in one word, describe what comes to mind when you think of business analytics. So there's going to be a prompt for you to type in something into a text box. So fill that out and let's just see what comes to mind. What do you think about when you hear those words? And what's going to happen is we're going to get a word cloud that's going to start to be generated. So you can see we're going to do our own little data analyses here, doing some textual analytics and generating a word cloud. So the words that show up more prominent in here are going to be the words that occur most frequently. So we see strategy as one of them, decisions. We see some other words that are insights. So it's something tangible, numbers, learning, direction, improvement, powerful, exact. All right, so we're starting to see a trend emerge that when we're thinking about data analytics and business analytics, you're thinking about what you're going to get from that process, and it's strategies, it's decisions, it's insights. All right, perfect. I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to have a couple more of these along the way. So let's dive into this a little bit deeper. When we're talking about business analytics, we're really talking about a process. It's the process where we use methods of analysis to gain some insights, information, make decisions, to be able to strategize using data that's been collected. And it's this cyclical type of process. So oftentimes when we think we're done, there's additional questions that arise that it starts the whole cycle over again. So we're going to go through each one of these one by one and offering more details, but it starts with the business problem. This is an important step that's oftentimes overlooked, or we don't spend enough time on this step. we need to think about what is the business problem we're trying to solve. And it starts with background information, understanding the objectives. What are criteria to determine the success of solving that problem? What are some of the constraints that we need to be aware of as we approach solving that business problem? Then we get into the data understanding. And this is where those of us who put those happy faces when we think of the word data, this is oftentimes where we thrive, where we become important. It's where you need to understand not just that problem that you're trying to solve, but what data do you have access to that can help you in solving that business problem? What are the methods you can use to describe that data? Explore it, verify the quality of that data. Then we get into data preparation. Now, all of you that have experience working with data and analytics probably understand that this is the step that takes the most time. You're having to do things to that data to ensure that it's of high quality, so that to ensure that it's formatted, that it's constructed in the right way, that you're going to actually be able to make those decisions, gain those insights, strategize using that data. And then the data analytics phase, actually, that's the phase that doesn't tend to take up too much time. It's the thing that you implement a process, implement a method to get some results from that data. And then that should aid and lead into this decision-making bucket, which is where you share insights with key stakeholders, where you can utilize methods of displaying the results that the main message, the main points from that analysis are clear. And you also have to have good documentation, because you may be asked to do this analysis over again. This oftentimes, like I said, is a cyclical process, because once you're done, you make decisions. Inevitably, you're going to have the person in the room or even yourself be like, huh, that's interesting, but I wonder about this. And then that's going to lead to that process to start all over again. So let's look at this in a little more detail. So when we think about how to articulate a business problem, we have to consider, what are the components of that business problem that are important? It's, what is the problem? It's really answering these main questions: the what, why, when, where, who, and how. What is the problem that needs to be solved? Why is this even a problem? When was the problem first observed? Where is it observed? Who's impacted by this? And how is the problem observed? A lot of these seem related, and I'm going to run through an example that might illustrate one way to frame your mind around how to articulate a business problem. The intention with these questions is that you're going to collect information that allow you to generate a statement. And the whole point of the statement is to be able to test the truth of that statement, to be able to drive the later phases of that business analytics process. So given that I work in healthcare, around healthcare analytics, the examples and some of the things I'm going to share with you today are in that context. But this is the same process that you can observe and you can implement regardless of the setting that you work in. So let's start that off with answering each of these questions: the what, why, when, where, who, and how. So what is the problem that needs to be observed? So this is for illustrative purposes. We're going to say that the problem is around staffing. We have nurses coming to management saying, hey, we have far too many patients per nurses. So the number of patients that each nurse needs to attend to at any given day in any given shift, it's too many. We're only able to keep up with the demand for the work. This is leading to is nurse retention is low. Nurses are coming and going. It's like a revolving door. Why is this a problem? Well, the next answer to that next question is staff feel like they're overworked and there aren't enough people to do the job. And they're worried about the safety of their patients, that there could be errors, that patients aren't satisfied with the care they're receiving. When was the problem first observed? Well, there was actually a change in leadership in this organization. There was a new CFO that was hired, and the this CFO wanted to cut expenses. So working with the other management, they implemented a new staffing strategy, which the idea was to have more efficient staffing, fewer nurses per shift, maximize the number of patients so that we can get a larger return on our investment of that staffing. But the problem that was observed, where was it observed? Well, we have data to suggest that looking at employee satisfaction surveys that have been returned, that nursing satisfaction is down. There's also patient satisfaction surveys that are returned that patient satisfaction is lower. And there observations during clinical care, there's actually an increase in the number of medical errors that have occurred during this time, as well as a delay in the time it's taking for patients to be discharged from the hospital. Who is impacted? Well, we have the nurses that are greatly impacted. We have the patients because the quality of care and their satisfaction of their care, and the healthcare executives that are being impacted because the fingers are being pointed to the decisions that they've made. And how is the problem observed? Well, nurses have submitted grievances. Patients are now publicly sharing their poor experiences online on the Facebook community sites that they have. They're sharing how unhappy they are with the care they received. So this is an example of there's clearly something going on here, right? Now we need to find a way of solving this. So what is the business problem that we're trying to state? Well, this just very briefly, we can frame the answers to these questions as the following business problem: that nurse shortages and staffing standards are creating poor staff patient satisfaction and poor health outcomes. Done. That is our business problem. So what do we need to do to solve this business problem? What are the metrics that we need to ensure that we can look at data to find a possible solution to solve this problem? Well, one thing we can do is let's start to get a better understanding of where is this problem observed across the hospital? Do we see that every unit in the hospital we're observing the similar problem, or is it isolated to just one particular unit? We could get information about if the return on investment is actually realized. Are we actually seeing lower expenditures, or are we actually seeing more expenditures as a result of medical errors, longer length of stays, and so on? So we can utilize data to identify how this problem is being expressed within the organization, so that we can make data-driven decisions about how to resolve this problem. So now we need to get data, right? So we have a problem. Nurses are unhappy. We have a staffing issue, and it's impacting the care that's being delivered. So we need to acquire data to ensure that we can look at this problem and investigate this problem in the right way. So we're going to have some more questions that we ask to acquire the data. Because the main thing with the data acquisition step is that we need to identify and acquire the data that is needed to solve this business problem, and be specific, like focus on what you're trying to do. I know myself as like a total data nerd, I want as much data as I possibly can get, but that might lead to a lack of efficiency in my job and duties because I get curious and want to go down a particular path. You want to stay focused. So how do we do that? Well, you need to think about, what data do you need? Where do you get it from? Who do you get it from? When do you need the data? Why do you need this particular data? And how are you going to get it? So what data do you need? When we ask that question, this is going to require a data understanding. What is the data that's available to us? What are the data fields, the data elements that I need to be able to solve my business problem? And you might be working with more than one data set as well. You might say, I need this data set to have these data elements, this data set to have these, and so on. Oftentimes it's helpful to understand the next question, because that'll aid you into answering what data do you need. So that is, where do you get the data from? So that is oftentimes from a database, that you're going to acquire the data from a database. Now, that may not always be the case. You might have departmental data stored on a spreadsheet somewhere in like a folder on a shared drive. That might be the place that you get this data. But sometimes there's data that's stored on a server, and you need to ask someone, or you need to do it yourself, where you can query that data from a server to be able to use it in a meaningful way. The only way to really understand that data that might be stored in a server is to have information about the structure, the data that is stored on that server. This might be where you need information on the data model for the database. And that may require a need to understand how to read data models, how to understand the relationships between different data entities within a data model, and so on. If you don't have those skills or knowledge to understand that data model, well, it may require you to work with someone. Getting to this next question, who do you get it from? Working with someone that has those skills. It may be the IT department, where you need to work with the business analyst, or someone in the IT, or someone in the IT department. Might be a database administrator who needs to gain access to the data model and write the queries or do the reports to then give you the data that you're asking for. That is oftentimes a back and forth type of relationship too. You're going to say, I need this data. They're going to give it to you. You're going to say, no, I don't need that data. I need this data. They're going to they're going to update that report. You're going to have to tell them again. It can be an arduous, lengthy process. So this is where you need to have clear communication, clearly articulate what you want. And the more information you have about the data that's available to you, makes that easier. When do you need the data? Well, you might put in a request. You might have a ticketing system for those types of requests. You might be able to set urgencies of like, I need this now, whatever. But you can't, unless you're the one writing the queries, oftentimes you can't expect it immediately. You need to be able to plan for some delay with your request to actually being able to move to the next step. Why do you need it? Well, that might be important to that conversation, because when you send the request in, you need to specify why you need that data. Depending on the type of data, there might be some restrictions on who can gain access to it because of privacy and security concerns. In healthcare, it's something we deal with all the time. We have HIPAA that regulates, what type of data, who can see it, how that data can be used. You might have some even enterprise policies within your organization that specify requirements of who can get access to what data. And how are you going to get it? Well, we kind of answered this already. Is there may be a process in place where you have to submit a ticket. You have to wait for a query. You might have the opportunity to write your own queries, and so on. So let's just break this down to even simpler component. What is data? Seems like a pretty straightforward thing, right? What is data? But it's not always straightforward. When you think about something as data, you might have to change your mindset about what it is you're actually asking for. So what is data? This is like, there's a continuum that goes from data to information to knowledge. When we think about data, it's the lowest level of things. It's the bits and pieces of things that we're working with. So for example, it might be 4.21. That's a data. That is a data element, 4.21, but it's just a number. More specifically, it might be 4.21 liters, but of what? It is a general idea. It doesn't have any relationship to anything else. It's what you use to crunch the numbers, calculate the averages, do the things with the data. Now, when you do those things with that data, it can lead to information. It's a higher level than data. It's data with context, meaning, and potential. An example would be Mr. X had a forced vital capacity of 4.21 liters on January 21, 2002. It's a general idea where data has relationship to other things. If you just present, here's 4.21. And that's all you say about that data, it's meaningless. But if you can add context to that, that leads to information. And with that information, that information by itself can lead to knowledge. This is where we make decisions about that information. It's even a higher level. We can say things like Mr. X's falling forced vital capacity levels may be indicative of a lung function problem. You need to have some tacit knowledge to be able to interpret that information. This is why those later phases in the data analytics, the business analytics process are important, because you need to present information in a way that people can generate knowledge, that they can make decisions. Let's do another poll. All right, I have to get back here. So what I'm gonna ask you is this. So when it comes to data, so go back to your website, and that website, pollev.com/CSSHIIM. And I want you to answer the question, when it comes to data and analytics, what is the primary focus of your organization? Every response, you can have an entire sentence that you type out, it's going to show up on the screen. So what's the primary focus of your organization? What do you spend the most time around when you're when it comes to data and analytics? Enrollment, I'm betting that came from someone from CSS. Tracking, forecasting, and decision-making, improving processes. And some of these things, you know, it takes time to really create a process that can be repeated to make use of the data using analytics. So client retention, expenditures, providing value to clients, sales insights, customer retention, cleaning up the data. Yes, I can empathize with that. Equity, another very important one. So we're seeing some trends emerge here. We're talking about processes. We're talking about having a data for the purpose of, you know, improving those processes to retain clients, to retain students, to improve sales. Very good. All right, very good. Thank you. So that gives me a good understanding of the different like industries that are on this call, one thing, but also it's giving me a good understanding of, you know, where you know, your various organizations are at in terms of your interaction with data. All right. So when we're talking about, one of the phrases that came up there is like cleaning the data. That's a step that's around data preparation. This is incredibly important. It's that whole garbage in, garbage out type of discussion that you have, right? You can use data and you can do an analysis, but if that data is of poor quality, the results that you create are going to be poor quality. So you need to make sure that the data you're working with is reliable. I'll give you some examples here in a minute. So data preparation, there's 3 key parts to data, preparing data. And this is the whole purpose of preparing data, is around data quality. It's when we talk about reliability of the data, that you can be confident the results that you're generating are correct, that they're reproducible, that if you were to do this analysis over again, you could get the same exact results. Oftentimes, this requires good documentation, because you might be doing things to the data that you need to be able to repeat. And that requires you to track it, like keep a log of exactly what you're doing with that data. And that the data is valid, that what the data that you're using was the correct approach to take. So I have a really good example with this. So my mother, she was a elementary school principal, and the way they would receive funding is from the state for the public school, and the state determined funding in part by the average income, by the average real estate taxes that are paid in that community. So they looked at average real estate taxes as a metric. And then I just became curious and started looking at that data and discovered that the average is a very skewed number of what's typical for real estate taxes. Instead, if you look at the median real estate taxes, that's much more of an accurate measure to use as what's typical. So the mean was being skewed because of extreme outliers. And so often I see things reported as the average this, the average that, the average whatever, but that may not be the right approach. Doing something simple like switching that from mean to median may be a better approach. One thing to think about is the distribution of your data that you're using. I'm not going to get into that level of detail here today, but that's important when we're dealing with numeric data, is understanding distribution. And one, just if ever you're curious, if your mean and median are about very close to the same number, that is a good estimate that you're dealing with data that's normally distributed. But if your mean and median are quite a bit different, you might be dealing with skewed data. The risk with that is the mean and median might be similar if you have like a bimodal distribution. Or anyway, well, if you got questions about that, we can talk more. Common steps to data preparation include things such as the following. We need to clean the data. So this is where you might have missing values. Now, you might think, okay, if a missing value, it is presents itself as just a blank. But that's not always the case. I can give you many examples of where it's missing data, but there's a value there. One example is 0. I was dealing with a data set where we were looking at body mass index, BMI, and I had a bunch of zeros in there. I'm like, that's impossible. There's not. So when I calculated the average BMI, those zeros were being picked up. What was happening is that the database that was where this data was stored is that the default value was set to 0. So if it was blank for that patient, it was set to 0. That's a problem. So 0 is a number. Blank means lack of, right? So that is an important distinction. We're going to actually go through a step where we're going to clean a data set, and I'll give you some additional examples. This is where you need to address aberrant data. Data that's there, but it shouldn't be there. It's a filler value. It's there because you needed to put something there because that's what the database required. And that can lead to a lot of problems when you're dealing with the data preparation step. So you need to be aware of what to look for with those filler values. Another step with the data preparation is constructing data. This is where you need to create new variables. Common thing that I have to deal with is calculating things like age. So we have date of birth, and then I need to calculate age. But how do I do that? Age could be the age of the person today. Age could be the date of that patient at the time they were at the doctor's office. So I can calculate age in different ways, but I need to construct that variable of age. And it may require me to use more than one date field that's collected. You may need to recode data or transform it. So this would occur if you have like categories that you want to merge into smaller categories. Going back to that age example, we might have an age field, but we want to express it not in terms of the numeric age, but in age groups. So from like 18 to 25-year-olds, 26 to 35-year-olds, and so on. So those are methods of recoding that data. You might need to integrate data. This could be done at the point of your database where you're writing your reports or queries, where you can integrate data from more than one data set or more than one table of data. But this may require you to combine data from disparate data sources, data that don't live in the same like server in the same place. You need to combine it. That's a common thing that has to be done. You have to think about what are the fields in those data sets that match that can allow me to effectively combine the data together. And then formatting the data, it's where you change the look of the data. You can change how that data is presents itself. It might be, instead of showing this many decimal places, you might shorten it. Instead of expressing this as a percentage, maybe you want to do it as a proportion. Some things like that. Removing special characters like $signs. Those are examples of formatting. Data preparation can take a lot of time to do. This is where you need to use software to help with that data preparation. Spreadsheets are great, but they have limits. So if you're using Microsoft Excel for everything, you might encounter issues where you're dealing with a data set that has more than 1 million rows of data, where Microsoft Excel may not work as well, or you can't even open up the data in Microsoft Excel. So you might have to use additional software and have an understanding of how to use that software to carry out more analyses of larger data or do more advanced types of analyses. With that said, though, Microsoft Excel, it's a must-have today. You have to have knowledge and skills using that tool. You also need to, it's smart to run some descriptive statistics to ensure that the data is reliable, reproducible, and valid. So look at the averages, look at the medians, look at the distribution of the data. What's the minimum value? What's the maximum? Does that make sense? Just use your own knowledge and understanding of the data to do some tests of that data. Are there outliers that just shouldn't be there? That BMI example I talked to you about, I remember there was a BMI in this data that was like 50,000. That's not likely. I also remember with age calculations that there were some databases that did the age calculation, and there were like people that were 5,000 years old. I mean, we're not dealing with Moses here, I don't think, but that it was included in that database. So be a critic of your data. Ask the questions. Don't put yourself in a position where you present the results and then you get that smart aleck that raises their hand and is like, hey, did you check for this? And you're like, no, because you could catch it. You could catch it before it gets to that point. You know, you don't have to embarrass yourself, right? And I say that out of experience. So let's look at an example. We're going to prepare a data set. So here's an example around population health and smoking cessation. Again, a healthcare example. I apologize. So you're asked to support a population health project where you have to select a patient population to offer coordinated care that includes primary care as well as mental behavioral health interventions. But what they needed is the patient population included people that indicated they had a history of smoking or they're a current smoker. So you are asked to utilize existing data, and the whole point of that data set was to select the people that you want to reach out to be a part of this program. So they need a history of smoking or be a current smoker. All right, this is the data set you were given. So here we have 4 columns of data. We have patient ID, we have a visit date, date of birth, and smoking status. Just look at this real quick. Just take a minute to look at the data. And you have to ask the question, is their data missing? I'm going to try something here. I didn't plan for this, but I'm going to just try it anyway. All right, all of you should have an option on your, so if you're in Zoom on your computer, you should have an option to annotate this screen. And if you click that annotate button, there could be this option to stamp. So in Zoom, there'll be an option in that screen that says annotate. And if you click that annotate, you'll see an option that says stamp. Using one of those stamps, just click on the screen where you might see some data missing. Okay, so try to do that. Click on the screen where you see some data missing. All right, I see someone put a dot next to visit date. All right, another one. Good, we got a few more. Good. Yeah, so you're catching some missing data here, right? So we have January 1st, 1900. We're missing data. That is a filler value. You know this happens. You see this, that when you forget to put a date in some fields, you get January 1st, 1900. Very, very good. All right, we have this date of birth. So the date of birth being January 16th, 1990. I don't know what's wrong with that. All right, we're going to move down to the next slide. Thank you for doing that. That actually worked quite well. All right, I got to clear the annotation out. Clear. All right. So these are some examples. We see for these highlighted fields, the date of birth that was entered was, and the visit date was January 1st, 1900. That's a filler value. We need to think about what we need to do about that. All right. What's going on Okay, let's look at other things. Any other issues? Well, if you looked closely, you can see that there's a patient ID that occurs more than once. This AC456 is a patient ID that occurs more than once. Why does it occur more than once? The reason is if you look over at smoking status, we have the record of 1 to 2 cigarettes per day and one record, and then a non-smoker in another record. So we're missing some. How do we explain this? Well, what likely happened in this case is that this was a person that was came to the doctor more than once. We don't have a visit date, so we don't know, we can't verify this, but this might be someone that came in one visit and they were recorded as a non-smoker. They came in another visit and they were recorded to smoke 1 to 2 cigarettes per day. So they have a different entry point. So we have that same patient ID occurring twice with a different smoking status. Anything else? Here's a very important thing. Remember, our intention with this task is we have to determine who are the people that are current or past smoker. So, okay, that means we have to say who isn't a smoker. So let's just read through this list. Non-smoker, we can probably say they don't smoke. 1 to 2 cigarettes per day, smoker. Non-smoker, they don't smoke. 1 to pack per day, they're a smoker. Current smoker, they're probably included in that smoking category. Non-smoker, we already covered that. Past smoker, so they probably don't smoke now, but they used to. And then not a tobacco user. Why is that? Why did we do that instead of just putting non-smoker? Okay, guess what? This is real data. I pulled this data down from a database that was collected. This is how the data was being captured. So now we have, like, if we were to be asked who are the non-smokers, what I could make my best estimate would be anytime it says non-smoker or not a tobacco user. That would be my closest estimate. If I say who is the smokers, well, probably those that indicate the number of the degree of how much they smoke. So 1 pack to 1 to 2 cigarettes per day. Current smoker, I suppose we could say that is someone that's smoker. And then past smoker would be someone that smoked in the past. So if I had to select the people to be included, I can confidently say that it's these people that have 1 to 2 cigarettes per, or that say the quantity. Now, this person here that was duplicated more than once, they have more than one record. So because of the confusion, we might want to eliminate them, not include them in the analysis, not include them as a part of the population. But we may want to take the steps to include some of these others that clearly are in that smoking category. All right, we could spend a lot more time talking about this slide on its own. So when we're talking, let's talk about the next step, steps to analyze the data. This is where we need to use things like, there's a degree of complexity with data analytics processes and steps. One simple, kind of on the easier way, is the descriptive statistics. In the last response that I asked for you to provide, what are you doing as an organization on data and analytics? Much of that likely could be done with descriptive statistics. You look at averages or counts over time, and that can give you the information to do some trending, to see where things are headed, to do some projecting. So that can be done with descriptive statistics, where you're looking at averages and counts and things like that. But where you might want to consider is looking at opportunities to do more inferential statistical analyses. This is where if you're doing trending, maybe look at how can I use a linear regression to predict what might be happening by looking at the relationship between your X and Y axes and creating things like, you remember those equations for the best fit line, A plus BX equals C? That is an opportunity for you to leverage the inferential methods to be able to, with confidence, make conclusions about those trends or projections. And then last is data visualization. This is where you're creating graphs to display the results that can aid in decision making. We're not just done here. Like, there are many other boxes we can add, but these are the most common types of analyses that we're doing. And you might need software to help you do that. Microsoft Excel, it's a must. You gotta have some knowledge and skills using Microsoft Excel. Other tools to consider using are data visualization software. These are nice to know. It's things like Tableau, Microsoft Power BI. There are free versions of these software. You got to be careful with some of the free versions, because if you're using data that can't be shared or shouldn't be publicly available, Tableau Public, for instance, is a free software. You shouldn't be using that software. You have to pay for the licensed versions. But they're very powerful tools, can create very meaningful, informative graphs, and you can actually integrate it with your any type of like database or data warehouse that you have established. There's reporting software that you may need to know if you're the one getting the data. This includes things like SAP Crystal, Pentaho as examples. You might have a system like even Salesforce where you're writing your own reports using that type of tool. Database software, this might be where you get down to that data model, the back-end systems, using things like MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server, where you need to write SQL code to query the data. And then statistical software. It's also nice to know, and it could be a game changer. This is the thing that I really like to talk about, is getting into this like really nerdy stuff where we're talking about how to program using the statistical tools like R, Python, my two favorites. SAS might be another. There are many tools that you can list under here. And also think about telling a story with your data. You know, there's a process, right? So when you're explaining your business problem, the data preparation, the data understanding, doing your data analysis, you can kind of think of it as a narrative curve where you explain the problem. This is why it's a problem. It's the inciting incidents, the crisis. Oh, nurses are leaving. Patients are not giving us their good recommendations. We need to do something. We're losing money. The denouement, it's like coming up with a resolution. What we can do is this. We need to change our staffing patterns. We need to think about eliminating maybe this shift from the schedule, things like that. In the end is we have a resolution that hopefully makes everyone happy. You're a hero. You get thrown on people's shoulders. There's a party, whatever. And that happens, guaranteed. And data visualization is so important because it can point the audience to making decisions based off of what you want them to see. So here's an example. You don't what the data actually means isn't important. What I'm trying to show you is that if you look at the graph on the left-hand side, the important thing that the authors want to show is this yellow line, but that's not obvious. But if you depict that data in a slightly different way, you can draw attention towards the important components. And I can have a whole discussion around data visualization principles as well. And then after you've done all your analyses, the thing that oftentimes remains is questions, additional problems. And this is where you need to restart that process. But I warn you, don't bury yourself into constantly digging that rabbit hole. Find a way to emerge, see the bright light, and come up with some good direction and decisions that could be made. Sometimes you need to just stop it, say, it's good enough for now, and then move on. But this is where we see in the field of data science and as data analysts, we focus a lot on that cyclical pattern, and sometimes you need to just break the cycle and stop it. So let's just talk a little bit about your organizations and how, if you're maximizing your use of data. There are models that have been developed that are around analytics maturity models. And this tends to be a good way of understanding where your organization lies with the analytics, the business analytics process. And it's relative to the amount of data that you use and the role of analytics in making decisions. At the very bottom, you don't use a lot of data. You don't use data to make decisions. It's where you're not using analytics. When you're getting to where you're using descriptive analytics, this is where you're doing things like you're looking at averages, you're looking at counts of things, and you're looking back. What happened? With this nurse staffing thing, what happened? Well, how did we? What is the problem? Diagnostic analytics is getting to using data in a way that you ask, why did it happen? So what about that nurse staffing nurse to patient ratio, the nurse and patient satisfaction, the medical errors. Why did it even happen? And using data to solve those problems. Then you're getting into predictive analytics, being like, okay, now if we do this and looking at the data that we have available, can we predict what the response will be? Why? So what will happen if we do something? And that's getting into predictive analytics. And then you get into prescriptive analytics, how to make something happen. So you're like, okay, this is the result we want. So we're going to use data to like manipulate the system and leverage it so that we can make it happen. That is like the ultimate goal, is this prescriptive analytics. So think about where your organization is. If you were to draw a line on this, where would you put yourself? My guess is you'd probably put yourself somewhere like between, oh, PowerPoint didn't like that. Somewhere between like descriptive analytics and diagnostic analytics. Bear with me for a moment while I bring up my slide here. You know what? While that's coming up, okay. All right, we're going to do another poll. It's our last poll. And I'm going to activate it here. All right, so if you bring up that website again, I'm going to ask you, what is the greatest barrier your organization faces regarding the adoption of a data analytics strategy? I see one person responded, it's a trained workforce, lack of a data-centric culture, time to commit to the projects. I bet you might, like, it's the greatest barrier. If I allowed it, you probably would, some of you would mark every single one of those things as barriers. And I think that's also something that is happening in a lot of organizations, that we don't have the time, we don't have the people, we don't have the culture to do it. So we have work to do, right? And it's worth doing. That is work that's worth doing. I'm just gonna let this stay open for just another few seconds. All right, very good. I'll keep that open a little bit longer. I'm just going to stop sharing the results here. So yeah, those are common problems that emerge, right? We see things like the barriers. Oh. The barriers to adoption include barriers because of you lack the workforce that has the skills and competencies to actually leverage and use data. You lack a data-centric culture where analytics, it's not an organizational priority. This is oftentimes on leaders. Leaders need to make decisions based on leaders make decisions based on assumptions rather than data. So how do you make a shift in that culture? Sometimes it's a proof of concept. You need to show them an example of how data can change that decision, and do it with what you have control over to convince leadership of change. There might be a lack of investment in technology where you don't have the tools or access to do things. It might be a lack of standards for data collection where you lack data, that data quality is poor, and that is leading to poor analytics. So to create a data-driven culture, because I guessed that would be one that came up high here, is that it's replacing that gut feeling with decisions based on data-derived facts. And the main aim is to empower everyone to actively use data to enhance your daily work, to utilize the company's full potential so that decisions that are made can be more successful, initiatives more effective, and you can be at a competitive advantage. And this is where you need to get to answering some of these questions as a starting point. Know where to access your data, where it's physically located, who is responsible for the collecting, distribution, and protecting of that data. Ask the questions within your own departments of how you can leverage data more effectively, and ask what data should be collected to improve your business intelligence. Maybe it's already collected, maybe it's not. You need to implement things. Also, if you're having barriers to a trained workforce, maybe think about advancing your own skills if this is an area of interest. There are formal educational offerings, degree programs, certificates you could be pursuing. There's professional development opportunities. Here at the college, we offer webinars, we do workshops, we offer trainings, we have MOOCs, massive open online courses that you might want to think about enrolling in. There's also credentials that you could be looking at to put a stamp of like approval that you are a person that has that skill and knowledge. And the future of analytics is like bright, right? We're going to see things going into like a whole, like it's the future is going to be interesting. We're going to see more automation occurring, artificial intelligence be more integrated. We're going to do advanced data modeling and prediction. There's going to be integration of more data sources, which is near and dear to my heart. I'm really interested in that topic. We're going to have better data sharing methods between organizations, even within an organization, between sites and different locations of that organization. And we have more devices that are collecting things. This is the idea of Internet of Things. There's more connectivity of things, devices that are collecting data that can be used. So my main point message is that analytics, it should be a standard of practice that is fully integrated in most things that we do. We need to think about these questions. We need to get to answering those questions to generate business problems that can be answered with data. Think about the data that you can use to answer those business problems. Think about the steps that need to be taken to prepare and analyze that data to drive decisions. Think about how you can present that information in a meaningful way so that leaders can appreciate that you're using data in a way to make decisions, that those decisions then can be tracked to see how effective they are. In conclusion, data analytics, it's becoming increasingly important for organizational success. Organizations, they're shifting their culture because there is a need to respond to data, and you got to, rather than just making assumptions based off experience and what your gut tells you. In the future of analytics, it's likely going to be very technical and will require advanced skills. There's opportunity to be one of those people, to be the one to take the lead with data, build up your skills, to be the helm of within your organization to take it to the next step. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And here's my contact information and a picture of me.
Hey, thanks, David. If you have questions, you're welcome to pop in on video or audio or submit it to the chat, and we can go ahead and answer those. Or David will answer those, I will not. I just want to say that I really appreciate you touching on the barriers that some organizations might be experiencing to really dive into analytics, because I want to say that every individual here is attending for a reason, and whether that's because you want to dive deeper into your analytics and your data, or if you want to start, I'm confident that this is, you know, an inspiration point for either one of those. So thank you so much for presenting and for bringing your expertise to our chamber and our members.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing any questions right now, so we can go ahead and close out the meeting, but I plan on sharing your contact information with the group here, if that's all right with you. And then perfect. I will go ahead and we'll share this video on our website too, so that if, like I said before, if you wanted to go back and revisit some of the information or share it with colleagues, I very much invite you to do so. So thank you, David, and the College of St. Scholastica, and we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, have a nice day.